our own Australia is in the second semi-final. In the first half, Steef van Gorkum, chief editor of ESC Daily, that's the only thing that could have gone better in this allocation draw, that they could have been in the second half or not.
Yeah, you always hope to get into the second half because countries that perform later generally do better at Eurovision. I'm not sure it's the biggest difference. I think Australia is going to want to come up with an entry that competes for victory again. If you compete for victory, this allocation draw is not even that important because you will have to come up with something that will qualify either way. They're in the slightly weaker semi, which I already hinted on before. I don't think it's a huge difference if you look at the big hitters that they have to compare with, but it's slightly better than the first one.
Yeah, because we see Romania with a 100% track record of qualifying. Ukraine is in there. Furthermore, Norway, of course, is always doing
Denmark,
well in the contest.
Serbia,
Denmark, of course. But when you look at all the other nations, sometimes they qualify, sometimes they don't. It's like it can go either way with almost all of the other nations.
Yeah, I counted roughly 7 really good countries in the first semifinal and roughly 5 in this one. So that's what I'm saying, a slight difference. Because they don't just look at the countries that have a 100% record, but as you mentioned as well, Norway, 80% record and 3 years top 10 in a row. Denmark, good track record, of course, even though they didn't qualify last year. But now they come up with some big words and possibly Anja Nissen. For what they're going to do this year. Serbia has a good record. Came back to the top 10 last year. So those countries are also dangerous. But like you said, there are also the weaker ones in there, and loads of countries with a roughly, let's say, 50-50 record. Countries that the countries that qualify half of the time, and a couple of countries even. I mean, we mentioned Czech Republic and San Marino in the other semi, but here you have Poland, which we've just discussed, and they've never finished above 8 in any semifinal in Eurovision. And then there's Bulgaria that qualified even only one time out of I think 9 attempts. So there are also a couple of weaker ones which Australia should definitely be able to beat.
It's always about the songs. We have to keep putting that on the list as we talk about allocations and draws and stuff like that. And in the second semi, Steef, we already know some songs like Belgium and Albania. They are both in the second half. Could that be, especially for Belgium, they have an up-tempo song, an advantage?
I think it's, as I said, always an advantage if you are in the second half. The general trend is to say that ballads need to draw late because people will forget all those boring ballads if they're in the first half. I don't really buy that. Because I actually think that for a song like the Belgian song, an up-tempo song, it could be an even bigger benefit if you are really late in the semi-final. Of course, now they draw in second half. We don't know what the exact spot is going to be, but if she is one of the very last songs to perform, Laura Tesoro, then that kind of happy feeling song, it's not a very thick song in the sense that it doesn't have much depth to it, much meaning to it, but it's a nice way to end it. It brings a smile on people's faces just before they're going to vote if she has that kind of draw, and that might just get Belgium over the line in qualifying.
When we look at cultural voting from the past, and we look at this second semi-final, which Australia is taking part in, we see former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia with Calliope, and she's a big name in countries like Serbia, Albania, Romania, Slovenia, Bulgaria. They are all taking part in the second semi-final. I guess she can be pretty happy with this allocation.
Yes, that's another thing that allocation draws are, of course, important for. Not just who do you compete against and in which part of the semifinal do you perform, but also which are the countries voting in your semifinal. I don't know if we've discussed also the big finalists, which of course also will now vote accordingly to one of those semis. But yeah, I mean. For Calliope, Macedonia doesn't have the best track record in qualifying, especially not in recent years. I don't think they've ever finished above 9th in a semi-final, and now they've come back to one of their biggest stars, who made them qualify in 2012 and got them almost the top 10. It's her third participation for Macedonia, and she's big in countries. And again, if you look at statistics, you say how important are statistics. you mentioned Romania. Like a country like Serbia is generally more likely, if you look at statistics, to vote for Macedonia. A country like Romania, maybe not so much. But this year they might, because Calliope is performing. And that's the thing with statistics. You always have to keep in mind, what is the entry this year? What are the chances? And what are reasons, possible reasons for certain countries to vote for a certain entry? And the fact that they've now come up with a big name, who is especially famous in certain countries that vote in that semi-final, yes, that's a big advantage for Macedonia.
You've hinted on the 6 direct qualifiers and in which semi-final they will vote along. In the second semi, we have Italy, Germany and the United Kingdom. They vote along. UK is in there. Is that a good thing for Australia?
I would say so, yes. And also, again, if you mention, we saw the pots, and it was, of course, difficult for the EBU to draw Australia in one of those pots, because they tried to look at voting patterns from previous contests. Australia doesn't have many. But it's generally assumed that UK is one of those countries that have cultural as well as diasporic ties with Australia, and that they are therefore more likely to vote for the Australian entry. So yes, I would say it's an advantage that the UK votes in that semi. And it also means, I think, that Sweden does not vote in our semi, which means, of course, a disadvantage for countries like that we mentioned, Denmark and Norway.
In the first semi-final, we have Armenia. Could they get an advantage because they are in the same semi-final as the Netherlands? We have France and Spain perhaps voting along in that semi.
Yes, well, I just mentioned diasporic votes. That's, of course, always an issue with Armenia. It even led to some people believing that Armenia could not qualify, could not fail in the contest, because there were so many diasporic people voting for that country. I don't really buy that. I do think that if there is a large population in that country, and if they all will look at the contest and will all vote, that they might be more likely to vote for certain cultural entries coming from Armenia, like the one last year, actually. I think that was definitely the kind of song with the message behind it that would attract voters from a certain area. So it could be an advantage. But the main thing for Armenia, again, is what kind of song are they going to come up with? We've seen the singer that they are going to send, but we don't know anything about the song yet. And so it's still very hard to say whether countries like Netherlands, France, Spain, despite their big Armenian population, will actually vote for that song.